Welcome to another unboxing video from theplayersaid.com. I'm Grant. Today I am opening Old School Tactical Volume 2, The Western Front 1944-1945 from Flying Pig Games. This was a game that recently came out was shipped from the Kickstarter campaign. I received my copy of the base game plus the Kickstarter exclusives, which include quite a bit of stuff here. As you can see, an entire new module entitled Airborne, as well as some dice, cards, neoprene play mats, and a couple other guides. I think a strategy guide comes with it as one of the extras. So I'll run you through this. If you haven't played Old School Tactical is a squad level combined arms combat, tactical combat game. It is called Old School because it's supposed to have the feel of an old school war game. Frankly, we played the first volume. We loved it. We enjoyed the mechanics. We felt it was very brutal, easy to learn, easy to pick up, great counters and components. But as far as being old school, I'll leave that up to you. I felt like a lot of the mechanics felt very modern, but it's still a really cool system. And we have enjoyed playing it quite a bit. That's why I'm interested in Volume 2. I'm really interested in Volume 2 because of the Airborne pack or expansion. So we'll show you that as well. So look, let me go ahead and these boxes are huge. It's hard to get all of this in my camera frame. So bear with me. I think I'm going to move the extra pile over. I'm going to kind of move that down, and I may pan down and just focus on the Old School Tactical Volume 2 main box first. You can see the art is amazing. You can see that's a Sherman there driving into some French town, liberating it from the Germans. Great looking art. The game is designed by Shane Logan with assistance from Mark Holt Walker. But a really nice looking box and game. I'll go ahead and put that over to the side. I have already opened this one up. I apologize. I wanted to just check things out. I was pretty excited. So I went ahead and opened that. First thing you'll notice here are the dice. One of the cool things that this system does is it has an impulse system, and they are alternating impulses. Each scenario will give each side a set number of impulse dice that they will roll. Sometimes those dice are modified, +1, +2. I was reading one in here. I think one of them was something like 2d6 +3. So each side will roll their impulse points at the beginning of the scenario, add those together, and then track those on the outside edge of the board. And impulses are used to then activate units and formations and move them and fire and get into melee, etc. A really cool system. I remember in a couple of the early scenarios that we played for OST1, I remember the Germans had like 3d6 for their impulses, so they would typically have somewhere between 10 and 15. It seemed like 10 and 15 impulses, and me with my Russians, because that game focused on the Eastern Front, only got 2d6, and I would sometimes have 6, 7, or 8. So I had to do a lot of passing from time to time, which was okay. But the impulse system is really cool, so that's what those dice are for. Sorry, long-winded reason for the dice, so I apologize for that. These are interesting. These are luck cards. Here, let me get the luck cards out first. So the game comes with cards. This game is not card driven. This game is not card necessarily enhanced. There are just simply cards. These luck cards, each scenario will say each player gets, whatever, 1 or 2 luck cards. And then these luck cards, you can see, have special abilities that give added benefits during the scenario. This one says your unit has extra grenades for use in any single attack on an adjacent soft target, which means not a tank. Add +3 to the firepower of your attack. May be used by any good order squad or reduced squad. Typically, these are one-use cards. So you'll use them, and then they use them and then they will go away. Having trouble focusing on that for some reason. There we go. So anyway, these are the luck cards. They have all kinds of different neat little abilities. A very nice addition to the game, and here you get a whole nother stack for this version. These cards are the unit cards, and you will notice there's a bunch of the White Star cards. These are the American units, and then there's a bunch of German cards that represent the German units. Now, you're not going to use these cards on the board in any way, shape, or form. You will have counters. We'll go over the counters here in a moment. But these unit cards simply give you an understanding of the capabilities of each of these units. So here you get an example. Here's some Panzers, different armored vehicles. There's a Panther, kind of cool. And you can see that those are then, here's the King Tiger, pretty amazing. But they have the movement stats, the various defense values, the front defense and the flank defense. They have their, I can't remember if that's high efficiency firepower or high explosive firepower of 5. Secondary weapons are 2 to 6. Maximum range is 30. And then each of the units has their, in essence, own CRT based on the range. That you'll know the number you have to roll to hit, and then different information. So each of these units, what you're going to do is you might have 3 of these units as well as some infantry. And the infantry are, I think those infantry cards are contained in the first volume, so you're just going to have to bring those out and use those in this volume as well. But you're going to keep those off to the side as reference cards so that you understand what your units can and cannot do. And then you're going to reference those units or those cards as you play through the game. I don't know why this is there we go. It's a little dark in my house. Maybe I should turn the lights on a little more. But here I'm going through the American cards. You can see all of their tanks, armored vehicles. They'll also have some trucks, some artillery. Here's a heavy machine gun. So this is an attachment that you're going to attach to a crew, and then you're going to follow this information when it's being used. So here's an example of an American infantry. This is a second line squad or a weaker unit. You can see the information contained on the card is pretty simple, and there's a quick look at that counter. We'll get into more of that later. Leaders. The thing we liked about the leader cards was you can see these are all the instances that a leader can use their command bonus in attacks, hits, rallies, different melee even. So you're gonna keep that off to the side and try to remember all those benefits. So anyway, here's a look at those cards. Very handy unit cards. I like that. And like I said, the units having differing abilities, differing stats, etc., really make the game interesting and add a little bit of complexity, but not too much complexity. More realism than complexity. So here's a look at 2 of the player aid cards. They are double-sided, and they are the same player aid card. Here I'm showing you the back, the terrain chart, so we'll put one of those down. But you can see there's the terrain chart and all the modifications. As I said, this is a combined arm games with tanks and trucks. So they've got a wheeled, those are for the trucks, a track, and foot. So you're going to have varying movement restrictions versus terrain. For instance, tanks don't go into woods. You can see there's a big old, there's an X there in a truck. They just don't go into woods. They go on a road through a woods, but they really can't necessarily go into the woods. So there's the terrain chart, and here are the CRTs. And you'll notice there's an infantry combat table there at the top with all those modifiers, etc. And then at the bottom, there is the vehicle combat. So you've got all this. Each player is going to have one of those. These are very nice player aids. I think player aids make a great game. If the player aids are not good, it can be very, very difficult to play. If they don't contain the right information, you're still going to be diving through the rule book. We felt like the player aid cards for this game allowed you to play pretty effectively, and you really only had to check up occasionally on a couple of the rules. So also with this version, you'll notice here's the rule book. This is a version 5.5 rule book. We thought the rule book was in general pretty clear, lots of pictures, which is in my opinion, always a good thing. We felt like it had lots of pictures, fairly self-explanatory. There were a couple in my first edition rule book. A couple times we read it and we kind of went, huh? And started scratching our heads. Sometimes we had to read things a couple of times to get it right. I feel like they've corrected this rule book as I was looking through it, took care of some of those problems, and hopefully that'll be a little easier for people to play it on their first time. The rule book checks in at 22 pages, which some of it's pretty dense, but some has like that. That's an entire quarter page is a picture or an example of, what do they give you an example of? Vehicle combat. So once again, you have the ability to look through these and learn the game pretty quickly. I think we learned it in about 30 minutes and then kind of learned it as we played. So there's the rule book. Here also is sorry, I just hit the camera, the scenario book. I believe there are, I want to say 12 scenarios. Yeah, 12. No, there's a few more. There are 16 scenarios. Here's the 16th scenario. And then there's a couple of, I'm not sure what these are. This scenario S1 and scenario S2. But I wanted to show you an example of what they'll do in the scenarios. So here, if you look at the boxes on the right, you'll notice those are for the German forces, 352nd Infantry. They tell you 4 rifle units, 1 lieutenant, and 1 light machine gun. And then they give you your reinforcements. You'll notice there on the bottom of that box, it has a gut check number and then an impulse points number. So that's where you're going to roll 2d6 to determine your number of impulse points per turn. And then you'll scan down to the American. The Americans only get a d6 plus 3. So the Americans are going to have somewhere between 4 and 9 impulse points, while the Germans are going to have somewhere between 2 and 12. So not that big of a discrepancy, but there is a discrepancy. So here I'll go over to the other page. Looks like the Germans get a d6 plus 3, and the Americans get 2d6 in that scenario. So it just depends on what's going on. But really, the scenarios are very simple. The scenarios tend to be fun and fast and furious, which I think is good, especially for a tactical combat game. Let's go ahead and check out the counters. Here's administrative counters. These are the boring counters, but these are counters that have to be included because obviously we need to mark units that have moved, fired, targets that have been acquired, if you have extra cover, etc. Notice down on the bottom, and I'll show you this here in a minute, here are the administrative counters for the victory points and the impulse points. You'll notice there victory points for the Americans and the Germans, and then here you have the impulse points for the Americans and the Germans, as well as casualty points. You're going to, in some scenarios, the goal is to inflict a certain amount of casualties. So you're going to use these to then track the... I'm sorry, guys. For some reason, the camera is not wanting to focus this morning. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and turn the light on, only because it is fairly dark today, and that's probably the main problem. There you go. Wow. I apologize, but there's a look at the impulse points counter that simply is, like I said, the administrative counter. So these counters are really nice. Most of them are 1-inch counters. They're very thick. They are pre-rounded, so you don't have to worry about clipping them. Very well done. My only concern with OST Volume 1 was the amount of counters that sometimes would accumulate on stacks. You know, you might have 2 or 3 units in a stack with a leader, and then if you have moved or used them, you're going to put one of these used counters on them. If they're shaken or broken, you're going to use another counter. It just seemed to me to get a little overwhelming. But it is good. The system is good, so a little bit of counter fatigue is something you're just going to have to deal with. So here's a look at some of the American counters, the vehicles. Remember we talked about flank defense and front defense. So you'll notice in the upper left corner of these vehicle counters, they have the red triangle. that is a facing element. So when you move these, you are supposed to move the red triangle in the direction that you are facing, so that if you get attacked from the behind, from the back, you're going to have a different combat value than if you were attacked in the front. Here's a look at some of the infantry units, some of the weapons that are attachments. Really nice, well done counters. I like the little silhouettes. I even like the silhouettes because they have the shadows. You can see the shadows extending behind the guys there. So really, really well done counters that make for a nice game. Here's a look at the German counters. And once again, guys, I'm sorry. I don't know why it's having trouble focusing so much, so I apologize. There you get a look at the leaders, the German infantry rifle squads, the pioneer units. There's the Panzer Faust, some Panzer Schrecks, HMGs, and then here's some of the glorious German tanks. So there's a look at those, and then here it's going to go fuzzy for a little bit. I've punched out some of these counters because I was admiring them. There you get a close-up look. You'll notice on the back of the vehicle and the tank counters, they have a wrecked side. So when they're destroyed, they're going to become a wreck that then burns and affects the battlefield. They can be used as cover. They will impede movement. And if they are burning, I think they even provide smoke cover. So kind of a neat element that they added to the game. Here's a Sherman. Or actually, yeah. So there's a tank. Sorry, my throat is hurting today. So there's a look at the counters. I wanted to show you the maps next. The maps are absolutely gorgeous. They're huge. And it's going to take me a second to set them up. I'm going to have to kind of move this over and move this out of the way. I think the maps are, I want to say they're 31. Let's look on the back. 30 inches by 41 inches. So these maps are huge. And they are fully mounted. So they are heavy. In fact, the box, when you get this game, if you don't lift with your legs, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to hurt your back. So make sure you lift with your legs. I don't want you to get a back injury. But here's a look at the full map folded out. My camera works bad this morning. You can see I have to pan up to see the top side of the map. You can see the beautiful terrain. This is obviously a summer or spring map. It's all green. There is no snow. In OST Volume 1, obviously being the East Front, you had quite a bit of snow, although there was snow on the West Front. But you can see there's cornfields, wheat fields, woods. The terrain is very well done. The maps are very well done. And when you play a scenario, you're not going to play on the entirety of the map. There may be a scenario or two that do that, but most of the time you're simply going to play on one quadrant. So you may have this two-part that you're going to play on, and they will tell you what hexes are the borders. So really, they've even got... if you notice here on the edge of the map, you've got the terrain listed. I think that's very helpful. I don't believe that was on the OST Volume 1 map, but I think that's a very nice addition. And you'll notice it says Map 4 because OST Volume 1 it only had 2 physical maps. I think one of them was 2-sided. So that was 3 maps in the first, and now this is Map 4. Here is the turn record track. On the side here, you can see you're going to track your impulse points. These are the 1s, these are the 10s. Over here, the impulse points can be tracked, so you can both sit on the sides of the map. And then there at the far end, and I'm not going to take you in because it's not really that exciting, you'll notice the casualty points can be tracked, as well as your victory points if there are victory points associated with the scenario. So my friends, that is OST Volume 2, the base game. Beautiful components, great looking game. Excited to get this to the table. I was actually hoping We might play this on Thanksgiving morning, but unfortunately work got in the way this week, and I've been unable to go over it. And we may or may not play today. We'll see how that goes. But now I wanted to turn your attention, and I'll leave it right here, but I wanted to turn your attention to the Kickstarter exclusives. There are more cards. I looked through these cards, and they, I'll go ahead and just open them. They have some neat looking elements added to the game. Here's a smoke, it's called Smokey, a smoke grenade that you get 4 smoke counters and are able to use that. Sometimes you don't have smoke in the scenarios depending on what's going on. Here's a supply cache. Bore sighting that simply a hit is automatic. Boy, that would be amazing if you needed a hit and they were in good defensive positions. So anyway, just some new luck cards that you're going to mix in to add some variety. There's one that's called Yeah, which is a reference to their magazine. Yeah magazine. It says a surge of bravery flows through the ranks. Lower your gut check level by 1 for the rest of a single turn. Your gut check level is basically your rally, your morale. If you roll over that, you're going to break. If you stay under that, or I'm sorry, maybe it's if you roll over it, you're going to not break, and if you roll under it, you're going to break. So anyway, additional luck cards. We'll keep those off to the side. These are some custom dice, and they're huge dice. And frankly, I don't know that I remember exactly what these are for. But we'll go. They're huge 6-siders, so they are double the size of the other 6-siders that I showed you. You can see there is the flying pig emblem, very nice looking. There it is on the black die. And then if you flip them over, here you have the Iron Cross and the White Star. So really nice custom dice. They look great. They're big and chunky. But once again, I don't know if these replace certain dice or if these are used as event dice, but we'll see. I'll get to that eventually. I also wanted to show you, before we go to the next strategy guide, I wanted to show you these neoprene mats that were one of the Kickstarter exclusives. All they are mats that then each player can keep in front of them to track all the important elements, casualty points, victory points, the turn, and I think even your impulse points. Yeah, impulse points at the bottom. So you're going to keep that rather than tracking it around the edges of the map. So that's a nice addition. Really a cool thing. Here is a strategy guide. So I'm looking forward to looking through that. I think they're going to talk about obviously how to use terrain to your advantage. That's what this section is on. What is good defensive terrain, etc. So yeah, it looks like you get a little indoctrination into the tactical field of combat. So I'll give this a read definitely, and then I'll whoop Alexander. I won't let him read this. This is not going to be shared between me and Alexander. But yeah, you got a little strategy guide. You also have this, which is called Pocket Battles. I'm going to go ahead and open it up really quick, and I know the video is now going into its 24th minute. But these are extra, it looks like they're extra scenarios with extra maps. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. But you can see Pocket Battles comes with a couple of paper maps. Yeah, they're literally just extra scenarios. And I think these are actually the Airborne scenarios. Yep, now that I look at them, they are the Airborne scenarios. So you're gonna, let me just double check that. Maybe they're not Airborne scenarios, but anyway, they're extra scenarios. The Airborne scenarios are probably in the Airborne book. But this looks like maybe it's a mini campaign in some ways. It deals mostly with Belgium, Highway to Hell, which is a reference to Operation Market Garden. There's a section for notes. But there you go. These are some pocket battles. Here are the maps, and they're just paper maps, but they're nicely printed paper maps, kind of semi-gloss. Like I said, you can get a look at the detail that they put into these maps. These are buildings. So kind of nice. On the back side, you've got a winter, kind of a winter side, which has some wintry terrain there. So we'll see how those go. Once again, don't exactly know what the pocket battles are. I don't remember, but we'll check that. We'll check that out. So now I pre-ripped the Airborne components, or the Airborne expansion. I'm gonna go ahead and rip that out. It's in a big box as well. Big, nice colored box, green for American Airborne, obviously. So there's that. Let's go ahead and it's a thinner box. You can see it's thinner than the old school tactical box. So you're gonna have to stack that on top. I'm okay with that. I like having stacks of boxes on my shelf, especially cool looking boxes. So these are Airborne scenarios. So this is a smaller scenario book. It looks like there are 6. There's a list of the 6 scenarios. Airborne forces in Western Europe. So obviously you're going to have, some of these are behind the lines in D-Day. Here we go in France. I think there's even a St. Mary-Glisse. Yep, St. Mary-Glisse. So that's obviously a very famous one. D-Day Dawn, taking the town square at St. Mary-Glisse, linking up at St. Mary-Glisse. So these are going to be pretty fun. And here's a look at the Airborne counters. Dude, that one popped out really nicely. I'll try to get that back in there. Those are really gorgeous counters. I love the color of the Airborne. Really nice touch. Get those close up so you can see. Yeah, those Airborne units are pretty nice looking. You've got some German rifle squads added. Here you have some C-47 planes that they're jumping out of. They don't appear to be in bad shape. So they're jumping out of a perfectly good plane. You got some extra trucks and vehicles. I don't know if these are that much different than the other vehicles in the game, but these might be specialized. Here you can see some trucks. Trucks are simply used for, they have 8 movement. They're used for transporting infantry. Infantry only has a couple, 3 or 4 movements, so you're going to be able to run those across the map. Here's some Airborne supply markers. Really like the parachute supply. Really nice, well done counters. Beautiful. The infantry counters are smaller than the vehicle counters, which is fairly standard, but really well done. Here, I'm going to go ahead and move this box, and I'm going to fold this map out on top of the other map. I'm going to go over to the side and use my counter. But this is also one of those huge maps, 30 by 41. It's not a small map. I'm going to come in here and try to gingerly lay those out. So the maps are subtly different. This one is darker green as compared to the other one, which was a lighter, more bright green. You can see this says map 5. Sorry, jeez. This says map 5 on the bottom edge, and I'm really having trouble with focusing. There we go. Map 5 on the bottom, typical setup. You have terrain markers, but here you can see this is I believe the map is the village of St. Mary-Glisse in France. So that's what the buildings represent, and you're going to fight out several scenarios in this one with the Airborne units versus the defending Germans. So really exciting. Frankly, we just added probably dozens and dozens and dozens of hours of playable content with not only Volume 2, but with this Airborne expansion. I mean, the Airborne expansion alone has 6 scenarios. You figure a couple of hours a piece. You always want to play these scenarios as both sides. So yeah, I probably got 150 hours worth of extra playability in this expansion and the OST Volume 2. So my friends, that's a look at OST Volume 2. With a look at the Kickstarter exclusives, including the Airborne expansion. Really a great looking game. These games are very highly produced, high quality, Beautiful graphics, beautiful counters. Really love the counters. And for many of you that know, Mark Holt Walker's done this for a long time. I think he started with Lock and Load Publishing. I love Lock and Load Publishing's counters, and Mark's kind of carried that tradition on. Great looking counters, great looking game. This is going to be a fun one. New off Kickstarter, I believe you can buy this now. It's available on the Flying Pig Games website. So go ahead and check that out. I think this is money well spent. If you're interested, we did a review, a thorough review of OST Volume 1, both a video, which you can find on our YouTube channel, as well as a written review. And we did, I think, an AAR on one of the scenarios, the Brandon Burgers. Go ahead and check those out. I think it'll give you a very good feeling for the game, how it works, what's good and fun. And then if you like this video, go ahead and like it. If you want to subscribe to our channel and like what we're doing, please subscribe. And go to our website, theplayersaid.com, for more detail and insight into this game as well as others. And thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. I've been Grant with the Player's Aid.